Well, welcome. Hi, I'm Chip Franklin, and this is What the Franklin. Great to have you guys here. We do this live every Friday morning here in California at 9 a.m. and of course across the vast terrain of the United States and the world. Actually, we got some people. We have Johnston, who is our CEO at Really American. He is in Japan watching this right now, and my good friend Adam Jones, the former major leaguer, five-time All-Star, he is watching this in Spain. So hopefully wherever you are, we appreciate you being here. There's a lot to get to today. The big story, of course, is Donald Trump. And I think we all are beginning to see his cognitive decline. We're going to speak in a moment to one of the stars of our new Shrinking Trump podcast and show on Really American that is just killing it. We're also going to talk in a little bit about Scotty Scheffler, the golfer that, if you haven't followed this, down at the PGA Championship, was arrested this morning. I've been following this early as a fan of the game, and also he's a really interesting guy. So we'll get to that. And a little bit later on, we'll be joined by David K. Johnston. If you don't know David is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who the New York Times said there's not a journalist in America that knows Donald Trump better than David K. Johnston. And I've been talking to David for, God, I don't know, 25, 30 years. And he was, back in the 90s when I was in Baltimore and in Washington, D.C. doing my show, he would come on and he would tell me about this guy, and I met Trump too. So we'll get into all that. Also, Brooklyn Dad will join us, and Kenny Hess, both from Really American. Kenny puts out these videos along with I do every day at Really American. I put out 2 8-minute commentaries every day, as does Kenny. And of course, Brooklyn Dad, with over 1 million followers on Twitter. He is on the White House speed dial. So there's a lot going there. Joining us right now, though, is John Gardner. He is both a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. And as I mentioned before, he is the host of this tremendously new, successful show called Shrinking Trump. And he's nice enough to jump in here. John, always great to see you, my friend.
Thanks for having me. So it was great to be here.
So I was on the show yesterday. I was not on, actually, but I was in the background producing it. And fascinating. It's to me, to try to explain to people what we're facing with the potential of Trump in the White House. And, those of us that have been watching him for the last decade, most everyone, but I recall very well the night on 2016 when we were all sitting there. I was on from 3 to 6 o'clock here local time. And
I think we all remember where we were. It's like the day Kennedy was shot.
Right. No kidding. It really is. And of course, the repercussions are growing. And it's interesting. Let me just play a little bit of this clip from the show. The show drops today at 2:00 on YouTube at Really American. Again, it's called Shrinking Trump. You can find it everywhere. You can also find it on iTunes and all. If you just want the audio version, I would suggest doing both, downloading the audio and listen to that in your car from, play it for some of your friends, because so much of it is frightening. Now, I'm going to play. I believe this is the part here is about the debate, because you and I agree on this point. I don't think he's going to show up for the debate. I think he is going to realize, or it's going to be brought to his attention, that you're not up for this. I mean, and especially too, if they bring in RFK Jr., it will, if you bring in those two, it'll be like Biden will look like Einstein at a track meet. It really will. But watch a little bit. This is from the show, and this is what you can see. It drops later today at 2:00. Is that Eastern or Pacific time?
Central.
Central. Okay.
2:00
Now
Central.
you're messing me up. Yeah. My friend of mine used to do a joke about that. He goes, what's wrong with the Midwest? It's in the way. Anyway, watch this.
I think it's a head fake, just like he wants to testify and he wants to release his tax returns, but they won't let me. Okay. I think he's going to keep accusing Biden of being afraid to debate. And then he will back out. He'll say it's rigged. He'll say he doesn't like the moderators. He's going to do a rally that night instead. Okay. So all I'm saying is when he says Biden's not going to, because with Trump, you can know everything you need to know about Donald Trump by seeing what he's accusing everyone else of, because it's practically autobiographical, his protection, right? So when he says Biden's going to be afraid to show up to the debate, he means he's afraid to show up to the debate. Okay. Also, when he says, he's not getting any better every day. First of all, I love that phraseology, because he's the one who's getting worse every day, and he's so worse he can't say it properly. He can't say he's getting worse every day. He has to say it in this disfluent, syntactically tortured way. He's not getting any better every day.
By the way, Harry is a great addition to that show. That's really good. Anyway, that drops today. It's called Shrinking Trump. You can find it anywhere. All right. So, John, obviously, as a both a psychotherapist and an MD, your approach to this is very analytical, but it's also, I got to believe that with your experience, there's a little bit of trepidation, not fear might be too strong a word, but worry about his continued ascent in the Republican polls and in the polls and also in the party. How slow does this maturation, I guess the inverse of that, this degeneration of cognitive abilities, are we seeing the peak now, or is it going to get worse?
Well, first of all, dementia is a deteriorating illness. So I always say to people, look at Donald Trump right now, because that's the best Donald Trump you're ever going to see, because it's all downhill from here, as hard as that is to believe. And what we also know about dementia is the rate of deterioration accelerates. So, for example, Sharon Begley did a study in 2016 where she got a bunch of his speeches from the 1980s and had a bunch of neuropsychologists compare them to more current speeches from 2015. And they all said they'd noticed cognitive decline, and it was probably due to organic, most likely due to organic circumstances. But now people who were served with him in the White House 4 years ago, because this was comparing him to himself 20, 30 years ago. Now people who knew him 4 years ago are saying he's not the same person. So in other words, the rate of decline is dramatically accelerated. And as long as I'm mentioning studies, on our first show, we had Dr. Vince Greenwood on, who did a formal study of Trump's speeches and Biden's speeches and compared each of them to their own baseline and middle age and to each other. And what they found that was so interesting was, in fact, Biden shows more signs of normal aging than Trump, which is what people are kind of observing, right? He seems older. But Trump had dramatically increased from 0 to a very high rate of signs of dementia. He had 7 different variables: phonemic paraphasia, semantic paraphasia, syntactically being tortured, tangential thought, these sort of non sequiturs. And so he was high on all those variables. So here's the thing. If we project the math going forward, but if he's this deteriorated and he's deteriorating at this fast a rate, the third thing you need to know is there's a place where people actually fall off what they call the cognitive cliff. And so at that point, they just become entirely disabled and they can't live independently anymore. I believe that's going to happen to him in the next 4 years. So we literally have the possibility, the real possibility, that we could have a weekend at Bernie's White House where we have a totally disabled president being wheeled around by, his unsavory psychopathic flunkies.
Well, there's a couple things to that point. And the first one is that there were governors of sorts before. You had Espers, you had Tillerson, you had John Kelly, you had governors on this car, so to keep it from careening out of control. The best example you can see is if you go online and find the interview with Secretary Espers, who was there in the middle of when the rioters were outside the White House, and Trump was asking if we could shoot them, we could use real bullets and shoot American citizens in the streets, and they brought him down from that. He and Milley and others told him, probably in language that he could understand, about repercussions, not actually to these people, but to him politically. But the other side, the other question, I guess, and of course that frightens me too, because now instead of Espers, you're going to have Stephen Miller. Instead of John Kelly, you're going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene or Carrie Lake, or some of these other. I don't even know what kind of adjective to apply.
Call them co-conspirators.
Well, we'll get to that in a second, because there is a cult thing going on here. I watched this Heaven's Gate thing the other night, an old documentary on Netflix, and it was fascinating to see how similar this cult is to other cults we've seen. I don't know if you had a chance to read Eric Larson's book about Nazi Germany in the 30s and the slow change in the American public, right? Frightening as hell, right? Anyway, but the other part to this is I want to ask you as a medical professional, for example, Ronald Reagan, when he was started to lose it, he was still sweet. I mean, he's still a pleasant person. Does this dementia exacerbate your narcissism and sociopathy?
Absolutely. I'm starting to say in dementia veritas, because it really reveals the true character of the person without any of the, the normal trappings and of our higher intellect. I have an uncle right now who's demented, and he's always been a wonderful person, and he's still a wonderful person. He just needs more help. Well, Donald Trump, but what we know about people with personality disorders is with dementia, their personality disorder gets dramatically worse. They become more impulsive, more irritable, more suspicious, more erratic, more confused. So it's really hard, I think, for us to really imagine how bad it can be. Number one, because of what you're saying about the guardrails, there'll be no one to guide him or to structure him. Also, it's the nature of malignant narcissism that people escalate. They become worse. They become more grandiose, more murderous. They give themselves permission to do more and more horrible things. Now we're adding like a whole third level of risk here. We're going to have, we would potentially have a leader who was in a state of dementia, who was in a state of confusion, who can't remember, who's president, what country we're supposed to be at war with. It really could be the darkest of dark comedies.
Yeah, we're talking, by the way, with John Gardner. He is both a psychiatrist and psychotherapist. He's also the host of the wildly successful Shrinking Trump, which drops today at 2:00 Central. You can find it by going to Really American on YouTube. And I think that listening to you guys yesterday to the show, which is fascinating, one of the things you guys were talking about was his cognitive awareness about the words he's saying. He tries to back up instead of acknowledging the mistake. And, when Biden misspeaks, he stops himself, corrects it, and moves forward, right?
Yeah,
when Trump starts to say a word that kind of a slur, listen here, let me play this one. You can see.
Is he crazy? Really? Just this week, it was reported that an illegal alien, and you just look at this, what's happening.
So he couldn't say the word alien.
Right.
Instead of backing up and just saying alien, he just ran forward. And we've seen him do this before with words like evangelical, anonymous in the past. It's Biden suffers from a speech defect as a child, which he's overcome and tremendous courage to do so. It is very difficult. And it was, especially in the 50s, right? But looking at what Trump is experiencing, this is getting worse. And explain to everybody a little bit, how hard is it to process information and then turn it into thoughts of your own and to come to conclusions and to pass that on to other people with dementia?
Right. Well, he's really losing his ability to think and to use language to express and to understand ideas. It's a very fundamental breakdown. But what you said about the gaffes, there's other differences in their gaffes other than his awareness of it. Trump is, and this is where actually talking to medical professionals is very helpful. Trump is showing a very specific symptom of dementia. In the example that you showed us and in the examples you described, it's called phonemic paraphasia. And it's different than a gaffe or even an articulation problem, or, as you mentioned Biden had. It's where you cognitively can't form the whole word. You start a word, and then you may finish it with an ending that isn't really the ending to the word. So it becomes a non-English sound. It has a part of an English word, but it's really a nonsense sound. And, there's tons of examples of this. You can all see it online, mishes instead of missiles, anonymous mish instead of anonymous. But the important thing, and now I think he's deteriorating where he can't even finish the word in a fake way. He just gives up in the middle of the word. So it's really important to understand the level of deterioration we're talking about.
And you guys had a great point yesterday. And again, this podcast drops, and I really recommend everybody get hold of it. It's called Shrinking Trump. You have this part in there where you talk about, and we've all seen the Hannibal Lecter thing, but what most people didn't see is what came before that. He was talking about immigration, and then he was propagating this lie that these countries are opening insane asylums. And in fact, he was talking about Africa, and he goes, "They're sending people from Africa," which is straight out racist. But as he started talking about that and insane asylums, for some reason, it made him think of Hannibal Lecter. And then instead of talking about immigration, he starts talking about Hannibal Lecter eating people, and he goes off on this tangent. And I'll be honest with you, John, it scared the shit out of me.
Good. Well, that shows you have good reality testing, because it's incredibly scary. In that moment, right, there's a lot of things going on that reveal his dementia. First of all, you mentioned the first one. It's a complete non sequitur, right? He's talking about immigration. He's talking about releasing people from insane asylums. But because his mind is demented, he has these loose associations. So a mental hospital makes him think of a movie about a character in a mental hospital. Okay, so now we've got the first... Yeah, what were you gonna say?
No, but before I forget the point, you and oh, I'm sorry, your partner's
Harry.
Harry, yes. I was going to say Harry Morgan, but that's not his last name. Harry Morgan was the actor. That's why I paused. You and Harry also brought up the point of of all the people to bring up in your mind, to bring up a serial killer. And this is the point I think you or Harry made. I don't remember at the end, but a serial killer that got away with it. A guy that never had to face the music, which Trump has never, until this point in his life, been called on the carpet.
Right. So no, it was Harry's point, and it's a good one, because in other words, look, if somebody's losing their memory and they're going to imagine they met an imaginary person or a fictional character. Look, Ronald Reagan thought he met fictional characters when he had dementia. He thought that he told these war stories that turned out were really from movies. But it says something about his psychology, right? So who's his imaginary friend? His imaginary friend is a serial killer who eats his friends, which is really kind of what Trump does.
Do you believe we're having this conversation? Do you believe we're having this conversation? God.
And the last thing I want to say about that, because it's very important, he calls him the late, great Hannibal Lecter. In other words, he's speaking about a fictional character as if he is a living person who has died, who is deceased. And I don't think that wasn't a slip. He didn't correct it. I think Trump is living in such a fantasy world. He doesn't know who's president. He doesn't know if it's Obama. He doesn't know if it's Biden. He thinks we have President Connor as our 39th president. He thinks he's running against Nancy Pelosi or Nikki Haley. He can't decide which. So this is the level of disorientation and confusion that we're talking about. And by the way, in that same speech, he started talking about OJ as if he was alive and pointed this to Lawrence Taylor. Said, "There's OJ right next to him. I play golf with him." So I said on the podcast, look, there's bad news and there's good news. The bad news is our esteemed colleague Hannibal Lecter has passed away, but the good news is OJ's alive.
And Lawrence Taylor is on a sex offender list for an attack against a woman. So there's that too. Anyway, each week you have these highlights as well as shrink wrap, which is kind of a summary. And you had a great guest. How do you say again, Professor Dode?
Dr. Lance Dotis from Harvard.
Dotis. From Harvard, yeah, he was excellent, and his insights were really great. So that's all. It's going to drop today, John. Thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again and seeing you next week. Again, John Gardner, psychotherapist and psychiatrist and host of Shrinking Trump. You can find it at Really American Media. You stay well, my friend. All right.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John.
Bye.
All right. Yeah, that was great stuff. It's really. I produced it, so I was right there and I saw the whole thing. So that's it. We're going to get to more of that coming up in the next half hour. You got to hang in there. In about 10 minutes, we're going to talk to David K. Johnston. By the way, let me apologize for Nikki not being here today. Nikki Medoro had some, she's going to have a couple weeks off the show, but she'll be back. Nikki's one of my favorite people in the world. She does her own podcast and joins me. We did 5 years together back at KGO Radio from 2016 to 2021. And she went on to host a morning show in the number 5 market, going from a news person in 3 years to hosting her own show. So she's really a fabulous cohort, and she'll be joining us back in a couple weeks. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be recording with Frank Figliuzzi and Adam Kinzinger on our show, Frankly, with Frank and I do. Frank, of course, a former assistant director of the FBI, and also you see him on MSNBC. He has 2 books out. The first one's The FBI Way, and his latest book is called Long Haul, which is about these serial killers in the United States today that are driving trucks, big rigs across the country, and 800 people or so have been killed. Amazing story, frightening as hell. And Frank will tell you more about that. We'll talk. But then Adam will be on the show. We'll drop it on Monday. We're recording it tomorrow. By the way, I read these comments, even if I don't get to them all on the show, I read each one of them. So if you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to pass along, let me throw a couple in here real quick. Let's go to Tish. When I was 18, I worked in an old folks home. They were all addled. I asked a nurse about it, and she said they all aged out of a mental institution. It's funny when you think of mental institutions too, and you compare Silence of the Lambs. If I grew up in love with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the Ken Kesey novel that starred Jack Nicholson, although the book is better. That's how I think. And it's really interesting to see how these people think. Joining us right now are the people that are the backbone of Really American. And of course, the infamous, the well-known Brooklyn Dad Defiant. Whenever I tell people, I know him. They're always impressed. Brooklyn, I mean, everywhere I go. Serious. I'm in an airport in Chicago. I see an old friend of mine. We're talking. What have you been doing? I work with Brooklyn. You know Brooklyn, Dad. It's amazing. And of course his millions of Twitter followers, and he just really he gets it like no one else does. And also joining us, Kenny Hess, who is part of Really American Now. He's one of our newer additions. He's not
superstar.
Not only is he a great contributor, you'll see his videos, but he's also helping us keep all this on the rails. Fellas, let me start with you, Brooklyn. The temperament of Twitter is different than YouTube in a lot of different ways, and Facebook. You're in the middle of this, and you handle it gracefully. I don't. I don't handle Twitter at all well. But what are you seeing out there right now as we in the middle of this trial? Some polls are showing that more and more Americans are feeling that Trump is actually guilty of these charges. Not that it may change their vote or not, or what they're going to do, but they recognize that he has committed a crime.
There's a saying that goes, I can't call it, I might spoil it. And honestly, I can't call it. I get stressed out watching these shows because, like yesterday, for instance, everybody was freaking out on CNN and MSNBC about Michael Cohen, being tricked or into like admitting that he didn't have the conversation that he said he did when he said he did. And so, Anderson Cooper was like, oh my goodness, so, it's really, since we don't have access to the video ourselves, like we're not able to see, which I think is an absolute crime. I mean, this is an historic event. It should be televised. Absolutely. So we're relying on the secondhand accounts of people who are reading Google Sheets, reports, and color commentary from people who are sitting there in the courtroom. So, frankly, what I'm seeing most people reacting to on Twitter are like the cacophonous clown car of congressional
Stop. The cacophonous clown car of congressional. That's alliteration at its finest, my friend.
I love alliteration.
Yeah, I do too.
Slam poetry.
Yeah, Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz, and with the four horsemen of the ridiculous showing up in the matching suits and ties the other day.
Yeah.
It's that I see more people reacting to that stuff than the stuff, because who can call what's happening in the courtroom? They spent 2 days direct examining Michael Cohen and another 2 days cross-examining him, and who's to say what is actually happening? I think more people are focused on Sleepy Don, falling asleep and crapping his diaper, than anything else.
Let me ask you this, Kenny. So, because I know this, I love putting these commentaries together. I really enjoy it, mostly because of what I've learned. I'm doing one right now on Laura Ingraham, who is supporting that Chiefs kicker.
Yeah.
Who basically says you're not a woman until you drop a mewling little pack of cabbages.
Who, by the way,
in some red state. But we'll get to that. But I like yesterday I did Giuliani, and I did not realize that Giuliani's family, his father and his uncle, both worked for the mob. His cousin was suspected of several murders by the FBI, and these were all around him. They all attended his wedding. They were part of his life. I love this part as kind of a metaphor. Both Giuliani and Trump attended each other's weddings to their third wives. No one can like these people. But my conclusion, and again, I would really, if you guys get a chance, go to Really American and watch my video. My conclusion is that Rudy is exactly the same person as Trump. He's not a victim. He's exactly the same.
Yeah.
And his mental deterioration is become obvious. I don't know if you had a chance to watch his Newsmax. It's great. It's theater of the absurd. His Newsmax shows. Kenny, what are you finding as you dig into these stories about the trial?
I mean, a lot of the stuff that you talked about, just the absolute insanity from all angles. I think my biggest takeaway that after getting back into politics and stuff very recently for the research here, is I almost forgot how insane these people are and how much just absolute they just lay down to this single authoritarian man. And like you mentioned earlier, Brooklyn Dad, just the them just going and even shirking their duties to the American people, not going to a hearing just to go in and get notes from this guy to say the things that he can't say because he'll get fined another $1,000, or which we'd love to see thrown in jail, but it won't happen. And it's just wild. And then to see, like, I know, Trip, you did another video yesterday on Fox News just gaslighting people. And even these, like Mike Johnson is third in line to the presidency, and he's gaslighting people with these same lines.
Oh, and he's
It's
lying
like,
prostrate in front of Trump. It's pathetic. And listen to the Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney and Adam Kinzinger, again, who we'll have on our Frankly podcast on Monday. I know that the frustration in the Republican Party with the old school, professional politicians, and that's not, by the way, that's not a 4-letter word. Somebody's got to do that shit.
Mitt Romney drives me crazy because every once in a while, like, he says
Something
the right thing. You know he knows better, right? That he's operating from that old school place where, politicians were not absolutely insane. But then he turns around and can I curse on this?
Sure. Yes, you can. Fucking A.
Then he turns around and he shits on the good thing that he just said by saying, "Oh, President Biden should have pardoned Donald Trump." No, absolutely not. That's insane. It's insane. You just want to give him free reign to shit on our justice system, to show the rest of the world that we don't hold the rich and powerful accountable. That's ludicrous.
Hey, stay with us here. I want to drop in a guest. He's a former federal prosecutor and an old friend of mine. He's actually at a courtroom in San Francisco. He's from New York City, but he's out there, I guess, doing some case out of his neighborhood. Randy Zellin joins us here on What the Franklin. It says Janet McClellan. I don't know why it says that underneath your name, Randy. Did you type that in there?
That's the comment, I believe.
I swear I didn't put that there.
Okay.
That's the comment, Chip.
Thank you for a couple minutes. You're joined by, of course, Brooklyn Dad and Kenny Hess, all from Really American. Randy, I know we don't have long, but I just want to get your take on what's happening in the trial. And let me just throw this out there first. Yeah, we know Michael Cohen's lied, but everything he's testified to regarding this exchange between Stormy and Karen McDougal, there's paperwork that backs all this up. So you can say that he lied in the past. He admits he lied in the past. He went to prison for his lies in the past. But what he's saying right now seems to be backed up. Also add to the fact that nobody's talking about this. David Pecker's testimony showed that catch and kill was happening, which is a lie. Catch and kill is not obfuscation. It is a lie. So, Randy, when you look at this, I mean, obviously we can't see it. We can't see all some of the documents and everything. But what's your sense of what's going on?
I think the problem that the prosecution is faced with is that, yes, we know that the entries made in the books and the records of the Trump organization were false. What the prosecution needed Michael Cohen to do, much like Hope Hicks, was to tie the former president in terms of both his knowledge that those entries were false when they were made into the books and records of the Trump organization, but more important, why they were done. Because merely making those false entries, it's a misdemeanor where the statute of limitations long expired. To elevate it to a felony, those false entries have to be done in furtherance of or to conceal another crime. And assuming that other crime is election interference or to influence the election, right, it was incumbent upon Michael Cohen to testify that the former president was in the room. We discussed what we were doing, and for Michael Cohen to say the former president approved what was going on, that's a bunch of nonsense. He should have described what the former president said, and to call into question the fact that Michael Cohen may not have had a telephone conversation with the former president, but with the former president's bodyguard instead, is devastating to the prosecution's case.
Trump was using the bodyguard's phone. Again, it's typical mafia Trump stuff, right? But what gets me is that, first of all, if I'm in the jury and I look at the timing, the affair happened 10 years ago. Why would you funnel $130,000 to her 3 weeks before the election? You did that with the obvious intent there is to shut her up right before the election.
I am both nodding my head and going like this at the same time. And that's the problem for the prosecution, because remember what proof beyond a reasonable doubt is. It's anytime you have to make an important decision. Do you have enough information, or do you need a second opinion? And I say a second opinion, like, for example, if I needed to have heart surgery because my doctor told me I needed heart surgery. Well, if I don't need a second opinion, I don't need any more information. I don't have a reasonable doubt. But if I need a second opinion, then I do.
Yeah.
And here, I just think there's way too much reasonable doubt.
But first of all, I think Pecker's testimony showed what they were up to the whole time, and that there was a long-standing attempt to change the facts, to hide the truth from people. And I think that's why his testimony, which was just, I mean, it was everything. The cross was pathetic. I mean, really, what do you say? In fact, it was the shortest cross I'd ever seen with Pecker, because they knew the more they talked to him, the worse it was for Trump.
Sure.
There's no way he'll be acquitted. I mean, we're talking hung jury here. I just think because of the preponderance of evidence. And also, I mean, Stormy's commentary too. Let me ask you another question here. Aside from all this, there's another story that's happening right now. I don't know if you've seen it. Scotty Scheffler, this professional golfer at the PGA event in Kentucky, was trying to get into the course, and he was told to go a certain way. And what he thought was a security guy came out, and he missed. Apparently, he didn't see the guy telling him to stop, and the guy grabs onto his car, and he keeps driving for a few feet. The guy falls down. Now they're charging him with second-degree assault against a police officer, which means, like, anywhere from 5 to 15 years in prison in Kentucky. When is this one of these cases that, because of quote unquote privilege, that this will go away? When you hear a story like that, I mean. And it was also, by the way, I should mention there was a fatality down the road, and that's why there was so much traffic. And he's trying to get to the course, and they want him there, and they got him out. He was arrested, booked. They put a jumpsuit on him, an orange suit. My son made a joke this morning. He said, "Tiger wears red on Sunday, Scotty wears orange on Friday." But what's your take when you see this? I mean,
If you call privilege merely having the resources to hire a good lawyer, then yes, this case will be resolved because of privilege. Because a good lawyer is going to walk in and say to a prosecutor in a conference room, look, this was an overreaction by an overzealous police officer. We understand that it was a difficult situation. There had been a fatality, but this criminal conduct requires a state of mind. It requires intent, or it requires recklessness, which is you are aware of the high probability that you could hurt someone, for example, yet you close your eyes and you disregard it. Like firing a gun into a crowded movie theater. You may not intend to kill anybody, but you got to know, if you fire a gun into a movie theater, you kill someone. Here, it is clear that Scotty Scheffler had no intention to break the law. He had no intent to hurt anyone. He was doing nothing more than probably being confused, caught up in a difficult situation. It was like 5 o'clock in the morning. He's got the pressure of, you may call it golf, and that it's not a big deal, but this is how he earns his living. He's the #1 golfer in the world. That pressure alone
and he
has
seems
to be backbreaking.
You couldn't have picked a more unlikely person to have to go through
Correct.
this. His conversations, he's very polite, very religious man. And
Yes.
in the way that I like religion, he kind of keeps it to himself, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Anyway, hey, Randy, let's not wait so long. Let's do this again soon. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I'll be in touch, buddy. Thank you. Enjoy
Bye.
California. See you, pal.
I'll tell you this, Chip, on the discussion of privilege, I don't think I could get away with
No
that
way.
at all. There's no chance. My black ass would be behind bars immediately, and
Dude,
convicted by Sunday.
I'm the poster child for privilege. When I grew up and as a single mom, I was on my own a lot. I got into what I should have been deep trouble. And because I had blonde hair, I did have blonde hair, blue eyes. And I can talk my way around stuff. I got out a lot of shit that nobody else would have, I mean, Kenny, I would have bust your ass in a second, right along with Brooklyn. Just look at you.
No, I mean, I've certainly had my fair share of privilege as well,
Yeah.
for sure.
All right, fellas, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Kenny see his stuff every day, and don't go away, Brooklyn, and Brooke at Really American on YouTube, and of course Brooklyn's Twitter handle is, as you see it, Brooklyn Dad Defined. Follow him right now if you want to get the latest breaking on just about everything. See you guys. Thank you so much.
Wait, I just want to say, Kenny, big fan of yours, man. Love your stuff.
Thank you so much, man. I'd been following you for years before I even came to the channel. So
we'll pay. Hey, I'll get a room, guys. I'll pay for it. Okay.
All right, cheers, boys.
All right, thanks, fellas. See you later. Bye-bye. Again, that is the Really American backbone there. Joining me right now is an old friend who is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. And I read this in the Washington Post about David K. Johnston. I'm sure he has it somewhere in his collection, that no journalist in America knows as much about Donald Trump than this guy. And he joins us here on What the Franklin, out in the beauty of nature. Good to hear. It's good to see you and hear your voice, David.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry that I'm using my handheld cell phone, but my whole neighborhood's internet went out about an hour ago, and they haven't restored it yet. So,
where are you? What part of the country?
I'm at my home in Rochester, New York. We're 5 blocks outside the city, where we've lived for 30 years.
You know, Frank Figluzzi, who the former assistant director of the FBI, MSNBC contributor, we do a podcast together, and we were supposed to tape it this morning with Adam Kinzinger, who is a neighbor of his in Austin, but Texas got killed by storms, tornadoes. He showed me a tree, like 100-year-old tree in front of their home that was just ripped out of the ground. I don't know if this is a direct climate change thing, but there's definitely violent storms, and maybe because of social media, we can notice them more now than we did in the past, but it's pretty insane.
Well, as a native son of California who grew up mostly in Santa Cruz, I actually prefer living here despite the winter weather, because it's a vibrant, highly educated, incredibly diverse community, and we don't have rush hours, we have rush minutes.
Yeah.
Life is very pleasant, and I have an old saying that if you buy $1 million house in Los Angeles, you get a $50,000 shack on a $950,000 lot. Here, it's the opposite.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk. You've written quite a few books about Donald Trump. What's your latest one? Help me out.
The Big Cheat: How Donald Trump Fleeced America and Enriched Himself and His Family. And we've seen now, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, got initially $2 billion from the Saudis, despite every single professional advisor saying, don't put any money with this guy. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's way more expensive. And now he's gotten money from the United Arab Emirates. And I think it's quite clear what was going on in the White House at the time. Trump's businesses took in about $1.7 billion during his 4 years in office, much of it from foreign governments and state governments. And of course, the Constitution has 2 emoluments clauses that apply to the president. You can't take money from the states or their creatures, the counties and cities, and you can't take any money from a foreign government unless you went to Congress and got permission, which he never did. Unfortunately, federal courts, when presented with these issues, ran away from them in an incredibly cowardly fashion.
Is this the only case we're going to see before the election, do you think?
Probably this will be the only trial, the one going on in New York right now, which I expect the jury will be charged next week, possibly as early as Monday. And it depends on whether they put on a defense. The Trump side has told the judge that they don't plan to put on a defense.
Let's explain that to people real quick. So the prosecution starts every criminal trial by showing their charges, right?
Right.
And
you
then
have no
defense,
obligation.
right. The defense can cross-examine all their witnesses. And in fact, that's an old saying, is if you don't have a defense, attack their prosecution, right? So that's kind of what they've been doing. They've been crossing hard, Cohen especially. So I can't imagine that they would bring, first of all, Trump's not going to testify, despite what he said, right? Not in a million years.
If Trump were to testify, it would absolutely guarantee his conviction.
Right.
The audience should know I'm not a lawyer, but I have taught law for 15 years now at Syracuse University College of Law. I teach legal theory and principles now. I used to teach the law of the ancient world. So I'm very steeped in the law from my 50 years of investigative reporting, which led to this job in my more senior years. But I'd be very shocked if Donald testifies, but if he does, he will do exactly what happened, and actually is in a different way happening now, in the E. Jean Carroll second defamation case.
Right.
E. Jean Carroll, the writer, won a $5 million judgment against him where Trump didn't go to the trial. It's a civil trial. He then, when she sued again because he kept telling the lies he was telling, he directed his lawyers on what to do, and he sat in court, rolled his eyes, and at one point got up and very contemptuously walked out and got an $83 million judgment the second time around.
And remember, do you remember what he said to Carol's lawyer? See you next Tuesday. Remember that exchange?
Yes.
For those that don't know, I'm not going to repeat the word, but take the first letter, each of those words. He basically called her a name that is incredibly derogatory. And
right.
But before we go down that route, I want to make sure we get go ahead, finish it. Finish that point.
About at the criminal trial in Manhattan right now, his lawyers, instead of doing what you would normally see happen with each witness, particularly Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, you would ask the key questions to undermine them in the eyes of the jury and sit down. They haven't done that. And they have actually created opportunities in which both Stormy Daniels, an incredibly smart woman who, had a full scholarship to go to college, but didn't have the ancillary money to do so. She was going to become a veterinarian, and it's much harder to get in veterinary school than medical school. And Michael Cohen have been able to land a number of zingers as a result. And this is clearly Donald telling his lawyers to torture these people as best they can on cross-examination. And it has gone badly. And I've yet to see a single lawyer who isn't a Trump loyalist defend the cross-examination of Michael Cohen.
It's funny to listen to Turley and Dershowitz try to spin that stuff, especially Turley. But let me ask you this. So you've known Donald for a long time, and you've seen his cognitive decline. How shocked are you by the rapid descent over the last couple of years?
Yeah, Donald and I are about the same age, and I've known him for 36 years this month and covered him for that amount of time. And it's very clear that there's been a serious decline. You see this in instances where he's at a rally and he suddenly goes into gibberish, which suggests that there have been some kind of mini strokes or other mental damage caused by his health condition. I tweeted the other day that if Joe Biden, if we actually have a Biden-Trump debate, and I don't believe Donald will show up, but if we did, that Joe Biden should do a Jack Palance. He's a Ukrainian, born here in America. Jack Palance at the 92 Olympics when he was 92 Oscars when he was 73 years old, dropped to the floor in his suit and did one-arm push-ups. Biden, you can find on the internet video of him doing push-ups with schoolgirls. He rides his bicycle much faster than I ride mine. And if Biden were to say, come on, drop to the floor, if he can do one-arm push-ups, he could say, Donald, it's okay, you can use both arms. Trump couldn't do a push-up. Trump is always been in poor physical health. He, he doesn't walk the golf course. He rides his golf cart. So he doesn't even get the exercise.
He rides it onto the green. He takes the golf cart onto the green.
Onto the green, which is, I'm not a golfer, but the golfers tell me you don't do that.
He's a cheater and all those things. But right. But let me ask you something.
I think his decline in the last few months has been significant. I think if we had a thorough record of the medications that he's on, the only one we really know about is he was getting vitamin B12 feel-good shots from Dr. Feelgood in New York back in the 70s and 80s. He's a relatively young man back then to get shots like that.
Whoops. David, I think there he is. You're back. Okay. David, your sound is not working right now for some reason. I'm not hearing you. That's, log back in. There you go. All right, good. While I'm looking at this, I'm going through some of these videos, and it's fascinating to me to see this decline. I've gone through and I put together a few. this is, of course, this to me, of all the things that Dr. Gardner said, John Gardner, again, a host of Shrinking Trump on the Really American Media Network. Of all the things he said that really resonated with me, and again, you can see this starting at 2:00 today Central Time at Really American. The thing that bothered me the most was listening to him talk about Hannibal Lecter, and he was talking about immigration. He was spreading that lie that immigrants are coming from prisons and mental institutions. He just made it up, and Fox ran with it. And there's absolutely no proof of any of that. And it was frightening to me, David. I'm just talking about the Dr. John Gardner, who was on with the Shrinking Trump podcast that we have, a psychotherapist and psychiatrist, and he was talking about the speech that he made, where he was talking about, again, lying about other nations opening up mental institutions and sending people over here. Oops, I lost him again. Anyway, and I just want that scared me, and that bothered me on a bunch of different levels. But I think probably of all the moments he's had most recently, this is the one that gets me the most. This is when he was talking in Pennsylvania, and he tries to go down the Gettysburg Trail. Listen to this for a second.
Where our union was saved by the immortal heroes at Gettysburg. Gettysburg, what an unbelievable battle that was. The Battle of Gettysburg, what an unbelievable, I mean, it was so much and so interesting and so vicious and horrible and so beautiful in so many different ways. It represented such a big portion of the success of this country. Gettysburg, wow. I go to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania to look and to watch. And the statement of Robert E. Lee, who's no longer in favor. Did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake. He lost his great general. And they were fighting. Never fight uphill, me boys. But it was too late.
God, does he sound insane? Does he sound insane there? All right, we got you back, David. Thank you. I know that.
Sorry about that. Lost the internet again.
No, that you're out there on the edges. So I love it.
Yeah,
Hey,
Donald is inherently, he lies all the time. To Donald, he's not lying, because if he says it to him, that makes it true. And it doesn't matter if he said the opposite 30 seconds ago, he'll just deny he said it.
Yeah.
And he's gotten away with that his whole life. There's a reason he says he hates me more than any other journalist, and that's because, I cross-check and check his what he said and done. And despite hiring some of the very best lawyers in America to come after me, he's never gotten a comma corrected.
Yeah. Well, you know what it gets me when I look at these stories is that there have been during his first administration, and I was talking about this with Dr. Gartner earlier, there were some guardrails, John Kelly, Esper, Tillerson, there were some people that were around him that had normal, politics aside. I don't think we're going to see that. If this guy, I really am worried for the nation and the world if somehow he should ascend to this position again. I don't think he's going to win, David. I don't. And in fact, I think it's going to be a sizable victory over the next 5 months. I don't see anything that he does in the next 5 months that will strengthen his position in what is a dead heat right now. But I do think that if he should somehow get there, we're screwed.
Well, we are. I don't think you should pay any attention to the polls. The polls told us Barack Obama wouldn't get a second term, for example. Fewer than 1 in 100 people who are called by pollsters are answering the phone, according to John Geraci, who wrote the book Poll-Arised, and who is a veteran pollster. He says, in fact, in many of the polls, it's about 1 in 200. So I don't think the samples, even if they, have the right demographics, are really representative, because so many people won't answer the questions. But more importantly, Donald will lose the popular vote. He will lose by a minimum of 10 million votes. I've been saying this for some time. But he can still become president because of the Electoral College. And we need to be very worried about that. There are 13 states potentially in play. And if the Democrats are going to avoid their long history of seizing defeat from the jaws of victory, they need to focus on those 13 states. What the election results in California, Massachusetts, New York are Biden's no matter what, and in
California,
Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, they're Trump's. So the effort should be to focus on the states where it might go either way. That's one of the reasons Hillary Clinton didn't squeak out a victory in 2016. She made a judgment, and it turned out to be the wrong one.
You mean by not spending enough time in
Michigan.
Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And of course, Trump had and still has the help covertly of the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, and the Chinese, all of whom are interfering in our election.
As evidenced during the Comer Jordan inquiry, where they were taking what they knew from Smirnov was Russian disinformation and intelligence to try to defeat Biden, just like what happened in 2016. And they were part and parcel to it. And Representative Turner came out and called them out on it, a Republican. He said, there is propaganda being spread right now inside my party. I don't know why this is not on the front of CNN, MSNBC, CBS every single day. They are in cahoots with Russian intelligence, which is Putin. Let's be honest. It's Putin.
Right. Well, and furthermore, you and I grew up at a time when if you or I had gone to a teacher in junior high or high school and said, I have a teacher saying the day will come when the Republicans will line up with the Kremlin against American agencies like the FBI and the CIA, we would have gone to the principal's office and said that we got a teacher who's crazy. And yet here we are. We have Republicans spouting both disinformation and propaganda that comes from the Kremlin, from Beijing, even from North Korea. And shamelessly so. And of course, now we have the news today in the New York Times backed up with a photograph that Alito acknowledges as true, that Justice Alito's home had an American flag hanging upside down on January 17th of 2021, which was a symbol of the election was stolen. Now, he says, my wife did that and it was only up briefly. Well, good. Let's hear your wife about that. And then he says, well, I only did it in response to an offensive flag put up by a neighbor. I'm sorry. If you're that thin-skinned, you perhaps don't belong in any role as a judge, much less a Supreme Court.
And by the way, Ginny Thomas, wife of Clarence Thomas, was on the grounds January the 6th.
Yes, right. And Clarence Thomas and his, what I call his bribe mobile, has still yet to come clean about the nature of what appears pretty clearly to be a $250,000 plus bribe by people who, well, they didn't have personal business before the court. They had ideological business and economic business before the court, in which he ruled in favor of those people. So,
obviously, the Democrats have an advantage financially, and which can really work in those swing states, presenting just so much. How big a deal, and I'm going to let you go because I know it's crazy there, and I really appreciate your time. I still think that Roe v. Wade will play out, especially in states like Florida. I think that will put Florida in play because in Florida, there's a referendum, even though it has to be 2-1 in order for it to pass. There is legislation on their ballot, like a prop, and it's going to be in play on the election. And I think it will get women out to vote. So I don't think we spend too much time on Florida with these other swing states. We don't want to make that mistake again. I say we, being I'm Democrat, but I do think that what happened and the way that he still kind of clings to saying, I was the one that overturned Roe. I think that still has a lot puts a lot in play.
I agree. And I think it's very important that candidates who are running against MAGA people make sure that they thoroughly and completely hang this on them and say, you're going to run as a MAGA person. You got to run for all of it. You can't pick and choose here. But the most important thing and what decides elections is getting out the vote. For a tiny fraction of the cost of TV and radio ads, which the audience may not know, those are all charged at the highest rate, the rack rate. You check into a hotel, you paid $99. You look at the door tag, it says maximum rate for this room is $524. They're paying the $524 rate. Instead of spending that money, put the money into making sure people are registered, making sure on election day that there are people who come as volunteers who will drive you to the polls if you need it, lawyers who will make sure if you're denied your right to vote, that they will be on call and be there. Those are the things that really matter. And the Republicans know, as they have known for more than 50 years, that they are on their way to becoming not just a minority party, but an irrelevant party if they don't change their policies, because the demographics of the country have changed and they're continuing to change. The thing I most worry about is the number of young people, and I teach at a big college, I lecture at lots of others, who are going to vote for Trump because of, they say they're going to vote for Trump because of what's going on in Gaza, which is Benjamin Netanyahu's war crimes, not those of Joe Biden. And why would you think under Donald Trump, Palestinians would be better off? I mean, it's like, I have two of my 8 children are gay, and they were both got a hold of me and sent me independently a photo, Queers for Palestine. Or,
Jesus, I've seen that.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm sorry,
Good luck. Go over to Gaza with that and tell people that. See how long you last.
Right, and so there's a lot of inchoate politics. There always is a lot of inchoate politics among young people. When you and I were young, the same thing. That's the nature of being young. But I tell you, as having just read 46 papers by my pre-law students, that we are not successfully teaching the fundamental textbook principles of constitutional government. Many of my students, even after my course, wrote with the assumption that a president just makes a law, that the courts are all powerful. I mean, just things that tell me the checks and balances message is not getting through. And it's not just those students. I've talked with many professors across the country in law, journalism, economics, and public policy who say the same thing. We are somehow not transmitting to young people just the basic textbook version of how American democracy works.
Well, to that point, David,
problem.
The founders, in the beginning, actually, the vice president was the person you just defeated. They intentionally tried to bring people together, in order to solve problems. Even they had no idea we'd have the 2-party division that we have today. But
Chip, let me criticize what you just said. The framers did that. The framers and the founders only had a 22% overlap. You said the founders. The founders wrote the Declaration of Independence. The framers, 78% were different people. They wrote the Constitution. And we've, over time, repeatedly had to go in and adjust our Constitution because we've learned that, the parts of it don't work. Hopefully, in the future, we will eliminate the Electoral College, which was born of ensuring that slavery would endure.
Yeah, and that'll be a constant. We'll have to, Jefferson said every 5 years we should tear it up and start over again. I don't agree with that, but I do
20 years, but yes.
Yeah. What did he say?
Every 20 years.
No, he said 5 originally.
Well, I don't know. The document I'm relying on says
according to Joseph Ellis's book on him, I said that.
Okay.
But the thing that blows me away throughout all this is that what you just said, the civics of people understanding this, to understand that we are not a democracy, we're a republic, right? We do have democratic institutions in that republic. Obviously the Electoral College is a mistake, and it's going to take a constitutional amendment to get rid of it, right? Probably, or could we pass a law?
No, it would. No, that requires a constitutional amendment, and it's going to be tough to sell it. I just spoke earlier this morning with a woman about 30 years old, married, a kid, 2 college degrees, 2. She did not know that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to be the candidates.
Oh my God.
Well, that's not that unusual these days. There's a huge segment of the population where, in their spare time, they play video games and other things, and they don't listen to any news, not even the brief radio news. It is not hard to find students doing that. Some of my law students, and these are students who want to be lawyers, were unaware that Donald Trump was about to go on trial in a criminal case because they pay no attention to the news. And with Gen Zers, this is a real problem. But it extends back. This is the result of a 50 or 60 year legacy of dumbing down certain areas of education, not having students read novels, which is an important way to understand what sociologists call the other, capital T, capital O, the other. Many high schools in America, they now show the movie. So, if you read Kill a Mockingbird, your Atticus Finch isn't my Atticus Finch. But if we see the movie, it's Gregory Peck's Atticus Finch.
Yeah.
And you don't learn on a deep level appreciation that there are many perspectives in the world if we don't do the basics in education. And teachers who do their jobs right get in trouble. We have the best friend of the youngest of my 8 children was a school teacher 30 or 40 miles outside Rochester. She got excellent marks. She was teaching high school English, including all of the advanced placement courses. And they fired her. Well, they didn't renew her contract because she taught To Kill a Mockingbird. She was called in and told, we don't teach things like that here. We don't want our students exposed to things like that. And they fired her. Well, she got hired in another school district. She's a great teacher. But think about this, a whole school district. And by the way, a school district that's been in the news repeatedly because when teams show up from Rochester that are mostly black teams, kids at this high school sit there and make monkey sounds and other racist conduct.
Well, let's, on that note, I just would recommend people read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is, and I just say that, and it's sad and depressing on one level, right? Of what happened to, from the Columbus, it starts with Columbus and it goes right up into, the segregation and further. When you read it, I come out of it with a depressing, but an uplifting sense that like we can change these things. I always tell people when they talk about climate change, they go, what can we do? And I go, well, look what we did with CPFs, right? We had chlorofluorocarbons that CFPs, we had chlorofluorocarbons that were creating a hole in the ozone. So we got rid of them. And the zone is closing. The hole in our ozone is closing. Right. We can affect our environment. We can affect change. Right. We can do these things. And I think novels inspire people when they're well written. And here's the key that most people don't understand about writing is that your protagonist should have some faults and your antagonist should have some good sides, because this is who we are. We make mistakes, and sometimes we make big mistakes, and we need people to pull us back in. We need a justice system that understands all this and is fair to everybody, regardless of your creed, race, wealth, whatever. I mean, I know that some of that is Pollyannish, but we can move toward it. It doesn't mean we'll ever accomplish it, but the thought in our head makes us a better nation and better people.
What you've described, Chip, is the entire point of our revolution to get out from under King George III. We will shape our own destiny to promote the general welfare, the common defense, and the other 4 noble purposes in the preamble to our Constitution. And Howard Zinn's book that you mentioned, one of the very first things you read is that not only did Christopher Columbus cheat the guy who first saw land out of the fortune he was entitled to, right?
He took it himself.
But they had mass on the 3 ships on Sunday morning. And then when all the Arawak people, the native Caribbeans, showed up, they pulled out their swords and slaughtered 5,000 of them, according to Columbus's logs, letters written home. I mean, this is well documented by the people because they didn't think anything was wrong with that. They slaughtered 5,000 of these unarmed people for sport. When we don't honestly teach the Boston Tea Party. I mean, standard thing I ask in lectures, both to students and public lectures is, so what was the Boston Tea Party about?
It's a great story. This is a great story.
Somebody answer up and somebody will say, it's a protest against high taxes. And I said, exact reverse. It was a protest against a tax favor of eliminating a tax for the friends of King George, accompanied by imposition of a monopoly on tea. Inferior quality British tea rather than Dutch tea. 3/4 of the tea drunk in Boston in the fall of 1773 was Dutch tea, and it would be made illegal. We don't teach an honest history even in our best schools, and you cannot have a moral and enduring democracy if you don't address and come to terms with these things. We still have schools teaching that Black Americans' ancestors came here seeking jobs and other such absolute nonsense. And they pollute our democracy. They weaken the liberties of all of us. And Donald Trump is a master exploiter of that kind of nonsense.
Well, and you saw what happened from, DeSantis in Florida through Arizona. I mean, there's in North Carolina now, they're talking, Ben Carson wants to outlaw divorce. I mean,
Right.
It's insane. But the positive side is there are people like yourself and others out there that are teaching this. And I have sons that are, I don't know what the ages are for millennials, but 31 and 33. And I look at them and I say to myself, my wife and I've worked hard to try to keep them curious, and constantly curious, just to, like, if they want to know something, I go, well, you have the entire internet, go find out, but go to more than one place, go to places you can trust, and then compare them with others. That's fine. Right. All right. We got to roll, David. So The Big Cheat is the book. People can find it on Amazon. You're looking well. It's always great to talk to you. And you're such you make me feel positive about things. And that's my favorite experience comes from you. All right. See you, pal. Thank you. Again, Pulitzer Prize winning writer and journalist, David K. Johnston. DCReport.org is the website, DCReport.org. Hey, thank you for everybody that joined us here. The Howard Zinn title again it's called The People's History of the United States. You can get it on Amazon. I got a copy the other day. I buy used copies to save paper and money, and I got it for like $4 and $3 shipping, so it was like $7. And I hadn't read it in a long time. There's also, Joseph Ellis is a great author. If you want to read his Pulitzer Prize winning book about the American Revolution, it's a real thin one. It's called Founding Brothers, and it's about the relationship between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Remarkable, Federalist, anti-Federalist, Republican, Democrat kind of concept, the size of government and all that. And they hated each other for the longest time. And then in the end of their lives, they became close friends, and they both died on the same day, July 4th. And so it's pretty fascinating. All that stuff is. So I guess the point is that with all this fear and consternation that Trump brings us, it can also bring out something strong inside of us. It can teach us not to be victims, to want to be dictators or authoritarian governments or figures. So I got to run. So this is, I want to tell you that. So tomorrow I'm recording with Adam Kinzinger, and Frank Figliuzzi, a former assistant director of the FBI. You know him from MSNBC. His new book is out called Long Haul, which is an amazing read. I just finished that as well. You can email me at chip@chipfranklin.com. I would say just go to YouTube though and watch. I'm doing a video right now on Laura Ingraham, supporting that Chiefs kicker that told women, you're not a woman, you're not a real person unless you drop some babies first. It's unbelievable. But all that said, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. I want to remind you that Shrinking Trump comes out at 2:00. So in about 2 hours that drops, and you can find it at Really American Media. It's a great read. It's a great show with a real good read on Trump's, sociopathy and everything we should be worried about. All right. That's it, Theon. Thank you so much. We do this every Friday. Nick will be back in a couple weeks. We're going to have a bunch of great guests again during the week. Follow me on YouTube. I post 2 videos a day, 2 commentaries. Hope to see you there. Till then, please be safe and keep at it.